In a shocking turn of events that nobody saw coming, the entire National Party frontbench has just offered their resignations. That's right, everyone. The Deputy Prime Minister, the Shadow Ministers, the whole team ready to walk away because of a fight over hate speech laws. This isn't just another political disagreement. This is a full-blown crisis that could reshape Australian politics as we know it. And if you think you understand what's happening, trust me, you don't know the half of it yet. Last week, the coalition experienced what can only be described as a political earthquake. David Littleproud, the Nationals leader and Deputy Prime Minister of Australia, didn't just threaten resignations. His entire front bench, every single shadow minister, stepped up and offered to resign in unison. This wasn't a casual conversation or a heated debate that got out of hand. This was a coordinated, deliberate show of force that sent shockwaves through Parliament House. The trigger? Labor's hate speech laws that the coalition ultimately voted to support, despite months of internal tension and disagreement about what those laws should actually contain. But here's where it gets really complicated. Susan Ley, the Liberal Party leader, actually accepted the resignations of 3 National senators who dared to cross the floor and vote against the legislation. 3 senators, gone, removed from their positions because they prioritized their principles over party solidarity. That's the kind of move that doesn't just create tension, it creates enemies. It creates permanent fractures in the political landscape that take years to heal. Littleproud's response wasn't to back down or negotiate quietly behind closed doors. He went nuclear. He took his entire team to the brink of collapse because accepting those senator resignations was, in his eyes, an unforgivable breach of coalition unity. The irony is thick here, because the whole fight is supposedly about maintaining coalition unity, yet the actions being taken are literally destroying it piece by piece. It's a paradox that reveals the deep structural problems within the coalition that nobody wants to talk about publicly. The National Party is supposed to represent rural and regional Australia. They are supposed to be the voice of farmers, agricultural workers, mining communities, and everyone living outside the major cities. But in recent years, they've become increasingly marginalized within the coalition, and this hate speech law saga proves it. The Nationals had specific concerns about how those laws would affect rural industries, agricultural organizations, and community groups. They wanted carve-outs and exemptions that the Labor government wasn't willing to give. So they pushed back. They fought hard. But ultimately, when push came to shove, they didn't have the numbers or the political capital to stop it. The Liberal Party, which controls more seats and holds the balance of power in the coalition, basically said we're voting for this, and if you don't like it, deal with it. That's not how partnerships are supposed to work. That's not how you maintain a functioning coalition government. That's how you breed resentment, and that's exactly what's happened here. Susan Ley's decision to accept those 3 senators' resignations was seen by Littleproud as a declaration of war. It was a clear message that the Liberal Party was willing to purge disloyal Nationals rather than listen to their concerns. Ley later urged Littleproud to reconsider, to step back from the brink, to remember that the coalition needs to present a united front to the Australian people. But the damage was already done. You can't expel people from the party for voting their conscience and then expect the other party members to just forgive and forget. That's not how human psychology works. That's not how politics works. People have long memories in Parliament House, and they will remember that when they needed the Liberal Party to stand with them, the Liberal Party chose to stand against them. That moment will define coalition relations for the next election cycle and probably beyond. Now let's zoom out and look at what this crisis really means for Australian politics moving forward. The hate speech laws have already passed. Labor got what they wanted. The legislation is now on the statute books, and there's no reversing it without another election and a change of government. So the immediate battle is over. But the war between the coalition parties has only just begun. Some Liberal MPs have publicly argued that the hate speech laws were actually necessary and important for strengthening Australia's action against extremism. They are trying to justify the split, trying to make it sound like they made the right call. But that's just spin. What they actually did was prioritize their ideology over party unity, and they've paid the price for it. The 3 expelled National senators will sit on the crossbench now, independent from their party, with no party resources supporting them, their political future hanging by a thread. That's a powerful warning to anyone who thinks about crossing the floor on major legislation. But it's also a massive gift to Labor. They watch the coalition tearing itself apart and they sit back with their popcorn, knowing that a divided opposition is the best gift any government can receive. Questions about leadership stability are now front and center. Can Littleproud hold his party together after this? Can he still command respect from his remaining senators and MPs when they see what happened to the ones who voted their conscience? And on the Liberal side, can Susanne maintain authority after firing 3 senators in what many are seeing as an act of political vengeance rather than legitimate party discipline? The Australian people are watching, and they are asking themselves whether they can trust these parties to govern effectively. If the coalition can't manage its own internal relationships, how can they manage the economy, healthcare, and national security? That's the question that's going to dominate political conversation for the next few weeks. The legislation that caused all this chaos is now law, which means the immediate crisis might actually blow over. Both parties might step back from the brink and try to rebuild the working relationship they need to function as an opposition. But something fundamental has changed. The trust is broken. The Nationals now know that supporting Liberal Party positions will cost them if they voice concerns. The Liberals now know that firing National senators, even in the name of party discipline, will trigger an existential response from the other party. These are lessons that don't get unlearned. These are scars that don't disappear. Inside the coalition rooms right now, there are genuine conversations happening about whether this partnership can survive. Some people think it's finished. They believe the hate speech laws crisis has permanently damaged the coalition brand and that it might be better for both parties to just go their separate ways and compete independently in the next election. Others argue that would be political suicide, that the coalition only wins when it's united, and that both parties need to find a way to rebuild trust and move forward together. This internal debate is happening at the exact moment when the coalition should be presenting a unified alternative vision to the Australian people. Instead, they are looking inward, litigating what went wrong, assigning blame, and trying to figure out how to save something that might already be beyond saving. David Littleproud's political future now depends on whether he can convince his remaining party members that his aggressive stance was justified. He has to show them that standing up to the Liberals, even at the risk of destroying the coalition, was the right move. That's a hard sell when the legislation has already passed and when his party still depends on the coalition framework to have any real power. He's walking a razor-thin line between appearing principled and appearing petulant. One wrong move, one moment where it looks like he's fighting for personal political survival rather than for Nationals' principles, and his leadership will collapse faster than anyone expects. The media will feast on that. His own MPs will start making calls to party organisation heads, exploring alternatives, positioning themselves for a leadership challenge. Party leadership in Australian politics is a fragile thing, and once the sharks smell blood in the water, it's almost impossible to regain control. Susanne, meanwhile, is dealing with the fallout from her decision to accept those senator resignations. Some Liberals think it was the right call, that party discipline needs to mean something, that if you vote against major legislation your party supports, consequences should follow. But others, including some senior Liberals, think it was heavy-handed and counterproductive. They are worried that Ley has created permanent enemies within the National Party, people who will never forget that she cast them out. In future negotiations between the parties, those expelled senators will have friends and allies in the Nationals caucus who remember what happened. The informal networks that make coalition governments work, the relationships built on trust and reciprocal favors, have been damaged. When you purge people from the other party, you're not just removing individuals, you're removing the relationships and connections they represented. That network damage reverberates for years. So where does all of this lead? What happens next in this unfolding saga? Well, the political scientists and talking heads on television will spend the next 6 months analyzing what went wrong, who was to blame, and what it all means for the next federal election. Some will argue that the coalition has already lost the next election because the public sees them as divided and untrustworthy. Others will say this is just a temporary crisis, that the parties will patch things up, and that by election time everything will look normal. But something tells me this is different. This is the kind of moment that defines political history. This is the kind of rupture that changes the landscape permanently. We might be looking back 10 years from now and pointing to this week as the moment when the coalition began to fall apart. Or we might be looking back and seeing it as a moment of crisis that the parties overcame together, proving that their partnership was stronger than everyone thought. Either way, it's historic, and you're watching it happen in real time. What this crisis really highlights is the fundamental tension at the heart of Australian coalition government. The Nationals represent rural Australia, agricultural interests, and regional concerns that don't always align with the urban Liberal Party base. The two parties have learned to work together, to compromise, to find ways to govern jointly despite their differences. But those differences are real, and they run deep. When you have a piece of legislation that touches on fundamental values, on what each party believes government should do, on how they see their role in protecting their constituents' interests, compromise becomes much harder. The hate speech laws touched on all of those things. They touched on free speech, on cultural values, on how Australia defines extremism, on how much power government should have to regulate speech. These aren't technical issues where you can find a middle ground. These are values-based issues where you either agree or you don't. The real story here isn't just about politicians fighting in Parliament House. It's about what this tells us about the state of Australian democracy, about our institutions, about how we've chosen to govern ourselves. We've built a system where coalition government is necessary, where no single party can usually command enough seats to govern alone. That's a feature of our system, not a bug. It's supposed to force parties to work together, to compromise, to build consensus. But it also means that when relationships break down, the whole system is under strain. Right now, the coalition system is under serious strain. Whether it survives, whether the parties find a way to patch things up and work together again, or whether this crisis accelerates the drift toward a different political configuration, is still being determined. The outcome of that determination will shape Australian politics for the next decade. This is why you need to stay informed, why you need to pay attention to these developments, and why you need to form your own opinions about what's happening rather than just accepting the narrative that any single news source or politician is trying to sell you. Political crises like this one are opportunities for ordinary Australians to think deeply about how their government works, what they value in their political system, and what kind of future they want to build. The decisions that politicians make in moments like this, they matter. They shape the country we live in. So pay attention, ask questions, think critically, and let us know what you think is happening here, because your perspective matters too. If you're seeing this and you're just as confused as everyone else in Parliament House, smash that subscribe button right now and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. This is Daily Aussie News, where we break down the chaos so you don't have to. Keep watching. So what do you reckon? Is the coalition finished, or will they find a way back from the brink? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, because we want to know what you think Australia's political future looks like. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you're always in the loop on Australian politics. This is Daily Aussie News, and we'll be back tomorrow with more analysis. Thanks for watching.